more at this point in your statement?
No, I was going to blend right into, from Mr. Mullins' remarks into our presentation this evening, taking a look at full-time in-person instructional model and our possible return to that. So if that's okay, I'll get started with that.
Please.
So and as soon as you put up, you can go to the second slide. This evening, we've outlined here what we plan to address in as much detail as we can provide. I will remind the members of the public who may be viewing that each one of our elementary principals held an information session. That information session was recorded, so it is still accessible to parents and guardians of children who attend any one of the 5 elementary schools. Those sessions were held specifically because there are certain elements that are different from one building to the next. So our presentation this evening will not always delve into the specifics as things will unfold in a building. But we're going to talk more about how we've been looking at the metrics and the guideline. Hear a little bit about how the testing is going. As I said earlier, Nicole will talk about our vaccination, and then we'll get into what our preparation has been, why we're making the recommendation that we are making, and then what that recommendation will be, and what our next steps are, and how those next steps do encompass the secondary level. So moving on now and looking at updated metrics and guidelines, what are health professionals sharing with us? What are we learning? What have we learned from professionals as well as schools that have been providing full-time in-person learning for students, in some cases for many months? And we can see there a lot has been written about the 3 feet or the 6 feet. And back in January, the American Academy of Pediatrics issued their guidance for COVID-19 guidance for safe schools, at which they talked about physical distance between desks should follow current public health guidance and placed at least 3 feet. So at that point in time, they were encouraging more schools to consider that. The Harvard Global Health Institute looks at schools with in-person learning that use effective mitigation strategies. And a mitigation strategy is 3 feet of social distancing. So using those effective mitigation strategies, schools that have been open were very unlikely to create super spreader events. Moving on, many people know, and has been referenced tonight, even within some of our public comments, CHOP Policy Lab has been a constant for us in terms of providing us with information. Their February 17th COVID-19 Outlook even identifies that schools really should be focusing more on municipal rates and where there is evidence of linked transmission in schools. We have experienced 2 instances of linked transmission in schools since our schools opened for in-person learning back in October. We have had no instances of in-school transmission since December. What are we learning from those other districts? What's presented here for you is what was issued to the public school districts, or actually all schools in Bucks County back in June 15th of 2020. The Department of Health in Bucks County issued guidance stating that 3 feet of social distancing was an acceptable mitigation strategy. And the schools, many of the schools that have been open in Bucks County have successfully done so at 3 feet of social distancing. As recent as February 16th, our Delaware County Intermediate Unit Executive Director, Dr. Maria Edelberg, reached out to Dr. Damsker, the director of the Bucks County Health Department, reached out to him just to follow up and see how things were going. And his quote in that conversation, "The schools in Bucks County have been successful with this guidance. That guidance has not changed." Right? They have maintained that guidance at all times, and we see that it is effective in those schools. As we look around, and it was mentioned in some of the comments earlier, area districts return to in-person instruction. I just caution us as we look at area districts that we ensure that the dates that we are identifying are dates that have been approved by the board, as opposed to communicated as potential return dates. To the best of our knowledge, these are dates, with the exception of Rose Tree Media and Wallingford. When we got this information, Rose Tree, I do not know if they have voted yet, but this was what was going to be brought forward, a March 22nd return. Wallingford is debating whether it's going to be the 18th or April 5th. They are going to continue to watch the trend data and how that moves forward. These dates are for elementary, where they will, by the time that they would have all elementary students in school. So our March 22nd date is not that far out from our surrounding districts that are all looking at that return to in-person instruction. So, and finally, we look at our own Chester County Health Department and the guidance that they have been issuing to us. One of their key statements is that they're encouraging schools to be as creative as possible, in looking at the needs of students. We have heard a lot about, our teachers will speak as well about the mental health of our students. And you will see information from Chester County looking at weighing if you feel that there's a risk that you're taking, then you also have to look at the risk that we are taking by not bringing students back for in-person learning, or in increasing that time for instruction. We are encouraged by the vaccinations. We are encouraged by the response to the COVID testing. So earlier I mentioned that the CHOP Policy Lab encourages us to look at local data. And when you look at our local data, you can see that within Haverford Township, the numbers are a little bit different from what we are seeing across Delaware County. Now, those of you who've been following us all along since we started talking about data many, many months ago, there was a period of time where Haverford Township's numbers were consistently above Delaware County data. We are now looking at those numbers starting to come down. And what you are seeing here are the actual case counts. And these data that are presented on here were presented last week. So that's what came out on Friday from the Chester County Health Department. Week 1 is the most recent week, so 38 positive case counts, which put our incident rate down to 76.73. We know that there will be fluctuations. One of the cautions that we are brought forward to us within those Chester County Health Department guidance is that you start to have your conversations if there are 3 weeks, and then you don't automatically transition back to hybrid or to 100% virtual, but you always come back to in-school transmission. Because these data here still represent the entire township, not just our schools. So we will always come back to, what do the numbers look like for our schools, and where are we having instances of in-school transmission? Do we expect to see some numbers increase within our schools if we choose to bring students back? Yes, I think the more we bring students in, we will see some numbers increase, because the way numbers are calculated, if someone is in the building when they were considered to be contagious, then they count as a case. So having more students in, we know those numbers are going to increase, but we will always come back to, is there in-school transmission? The county data does not mirror the community or the district's data. These are the documents that we look forward to receiving every Friday. You can see right in the center of the screen, the red circle identifying those numbers for Delaware County by comparison, where Delaware County was at 115 count for the 100 incidents. Our schools were much lower than that. The document over on the right presents the positivity. And you can see that over a 4-week period of time, that positivity rate is decreasing, with the last week with it being at 6.31%. An average, so that would be the average for the entire month of February, was down to 6.9%. Again, much better than we were looking at a previous point in time. Right? So the Delaware County numbers are not the only factor that we will be taking a look at. We'll look at our township numbers, but then we'll also go so far as to look at our in-school transmission, which has been supported by CHOP, University of Pennsylvania, and Chester County Health Department. We are not moving away from our interactions with Chester County Health Department should we choose to move to 5 days in-person learning. They will still be providing the guidance. They will still be providing the communication, the monitoring with us in terms of, how to respond to cases if or when they do occur. There have also been some questions about, how do we know how our staff feel? And this evening we were able to hear, a little bit from Mr. Mullen, very eloquently put about how our staff feel, and torn because they do so desperately want to, if they could go back to the beginning of March, February last year, how many of us would take full advantage of that. We did issue a survey to our staff back on February 1st. I want to say though, this survey was issued not asking people if they wanted to come back into the classroom. I don't feel that's a fair question to ask people. That's not really a decision. Do you come to your place of employment? And we framed our survey out to the staff, trying to get at their comfort level and how comfortable people felt with mitigation strategies that are in place. How comfortable might they feel if there were additional mitigation strategies put into place? And then identification if there was really nothing that they felt at that point in time would make them feel any level of comfort. When this was issued, the vaccines, there was no organized effort to vaccinate. That is an extremely recent development. So we don't know how much that would have or may have influenced if we were, issuing this at a different time. All of the recipients recipients of the survey did not respond to it. That's not new. We issue surveys and we don't always have all of our recipients responding. But out of 409 of the 485 professional educators, right, so that would be all of our teaching staff. That would also like people who are employed as long-term subs in the building, guaranteed building subs in the building. 202 feel comfortable with the current or some add-ons. 207 are not comfortable at all. We also surveyed our instructional assistants. 98 of the 123 recipients did respond to that survey. 62 were comfortable with the way things were or with some of the add-ons there. And 36 instructional assistants indicated that they couldn't identify anything that would make them feel comfortable in the building. So what do we do with this? 202, 207, that's really not a big difference. What does this tell us? Well, what this lets us know is that there are 207 people that we need to make sure that we are accessible to, that we try to look to see what could we possibly do to help them feel comfortable coming in, and how can we help them prepare for a return of students to 5 days of in-person learning. Our intent was in issuing this was never to say, this is what teachers want, or this is what instructional assistants don't want. Therefore, we're going to, make a decision on whether or not to return to in-person instruction based solely on that particular data point. But people have asked about it, so we're sharing that information with you. And now I'm going to turn it over to Nicole Battistelli, who's going to talk with us about some of the testing, the vaccination, the preparation that we have been engaging in for the recommendation that we will be bringing forward to you tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Rishi. The last time I presented on Project ACET, we were very much in the planning stages of this program. Project ACET is a federal program that CHOP and the DCIU and the Chester County Health Department have been organizing in our area. This provides for rapid antigen testing of staff and at some point, possibly symptomatic students. We have started the assurance testing, weekly assurance testing of staff. We started last week and we had 80 staff members tested across all of our buildings and all of our employee groups. We did have one positive staff member who was asymptomatic. This week we are in the middle of testing because we do it at a different building each day. So we still have a few buildings to get to this week, but around 100 staff members will participate. So far, we have not had a positive yet this week. So this testing has been in place for now the second week, and we're hopeful that we will get more participation in the coming weeks. Good. Thank you, Anna. Last time when I presented, I also did not have much of an update for vaccine. And so I'm happy to report that we are now have been notified that there is a plan to vaccinate our staff members. We were notified that there are 346 vaccines available to our school district. We will be working with the PA Department of Health, the PA Department of Education, and the DCIU to coordinate the vaccine distribution. The vaccine distribution will take place at the DCIU before March 22nd. And a company called AMI Healthcare and the National Guard will be vaccinating our staff members. So we were very excited to get this news. And I just want to thank everyone who took the time to advocate for our staff to receive this vaccine. Thank you. And here's just a list of some additional supports, equipment, materials, items we're going to have in place if we do move forward. Obviously, there's a need for increasing the hours of our custodians in the building. There will be more cleaning taking place. We are still in need of some additional lunch monitors. We do appreciate everyone who has reached out to us and interviewed and have volunteered to become lunch monitors in our elementary schools. We have ordered 600 additional desks to replace tables in the K-2 classrooms. We also have storage containers coming to store the tables for the K-2 classrooms. And this is really about fitting the students in the classroom with the desks. It's much easier to fit students with desks instead of each at a table. We have ordered 2,200 additional workplace shields, which are basically little plastic dividers for student desks. And we have also ordered additional face shields and masks for every building. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Jen Saska so she can speak about the return to full-time in-person learning. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole. So now that we have a picture of the current data trends, we are going to turn to the recommendation to increase in-person time for students. Why do we feel like this is important to consider this newly available option? Some of the reasons are listed here, including the updated guidance and increased testing, additional PPE. All of those things make returning to more in-person time safer and a healthier option. Additionally, various organizations such as the American Academy of Pediatrics, the CDC, and CHOP, as we've spoken about earlier today, have all publicly recognized, and our educators concur, that more in-person time for students contributes to improved social and emotional health. While our teachers, students, and their guardians have been doing a tremendous job staying focused academically, there is no question that being present in the classroom for more in-person minutes will support students' academic success. And finally, reestablishing routines and increasing the students' classroom communities will be integral to improving the school experience for all children. As with any decision, we completed a multi-step planning process in order to prepare for the return to more in-person learning time. Our administrators continue to evaluate any data and any updated guidance, all while planning logistics and prioritizing communication. First, though, we evaluated our physical spaces to determine if we would be able to fit our current students into our classrooms with at least 3 feet of distance between them in instructional spaces. This has been an organizational feat completed by our principals, custodians, teachers, and support staff, as it requires us to reconfigure classrooms, order new desks, and use additional spaces in the building. Principals have also been collaborating with staff through question and answer opportunities, faculty advisory groups, and constant conversations to plan the logistics of the proposed transition. Additionally, principals held meetings for parents and guardians to review the details of what will change for in the buildings and what will not upon returning to more in-person time. And as always, we reached out specifically to our Haverford Online families so that they would have the information and know what to expect, as well as how to indicate a preference to change their program if they did have one. Our hybrid families, as you'll see in a little bit, were asked to complete a preference form. And one of these final steps of the planning process is actually occurring right now as we are making this recommendation at a school board meeting. Many of our elementary parents and guardians were able to attend our principals meetings or were able to access their videos that were sent as a follow-up. And there they learned about the items that you see here. There are a few here that I would like to emphasize though this evening. One is the appreciation that we all feel for students and families for all they've done to support teachers and schools this year. Of utmost importance is also what Nicole was just talking about, which is the call for additional lunch monitors. We're thrilled that we have had interest from some folks who applied for this position, and we still need even more lunch monitors to ensure that our students can be supervised both while eating as well as on the playgrounds. Another item for emphasis is the fact that upon this return to full-time in-person instruction, we will be adhering to our attendance policy and procedures and expect the students who are signed up for the in-person model to actually be present each day. Of course, same rules apply. Please stay home if you are not feeling well. Send in absence notes as usual. A change, however, is that it will only be students who are quarantined or in isolation that will be participating via Zoom. If a student is absent for a day or on a family trip, they'll be absent from school and follow the makeup procedures just like they would in a typical school year. This will allow for greater consistency and enable our teachers to focus on planning for and instructing the students with a reliable sense of who will be in the room. The majority of what is currently in our health and safety plan actually remains the same. We do continue to mask, sanitize, and we ask, of course, our families to screen children for symptoms at home before sending them to school. For those students who are remaining in person, their teacher and their class will remain the same. Those who transition between programs will have a new teacher and a different set of classmates. The elementary school day arrival and dismissal times remain the same, but principals did share more specifics regarding the procedures at their meetings with families. There are some adjustments to car line procedures and all of that to account for a greater flow of traffic. It is also important to note that quarantine guidelines will still require that anyone within 6 feet of a COVID positive or presumed positive person for 15 minutes or more during the infectious period is quarantined. This does not mean that a whole class would need to quarantine, only those that are seated within that 6 feet for 15 minutes or more. In addition to logistics that are specific to the building, such as those arrival and dismissal procedures, you can see the other items that will be different include elements of what we've already discussed this evening. Of note is the addition of more plexiglass, which we just heard about, sometimes on the teacher desk and other times on the student desks. This is dependent on the configuration of the classroom as well as the number of students using it. These factors also play a role in determining how teaching and learning will look in the classroom. Teachers have been very careful to keep the appropriate social distance throughout this school year, and now we'll be planning how do they do that with even more students in the room. They're carefully crafting seating charts so that small groups can still occur without a minimum of movement, and also deciding how technology might be able to help with small groups and guided reading. I just want to offer my congratulations and appreciation for our teachers and all of our educators who are once again finding ways to deliver sound instruction in a new circumstance and a new environment. So with all of this information, parents and guardians were asked to indicate their preference on a Google form that was due this past Monday. We had a very strong response, and principals did reach out to families who did not initially respond. And then for those who did not complete the survey at all, we will keep them where they are presently, either in their Haverford Online class or in their in-person model, in an in-person model. As you can see here with this graph, the vast majority of those who are currently attending the hybrid model have selected to remain in person as we move to the full-time model. 74 respondents, or 3.3%, have indicated a preference to shift to Haverford Online. Principals will be working this week and next to determine how to accommodate those requests. They're also working to accommodate the requests of those who currently attend Haverford Online and indicated that they prefer to shift to the in-person model. So of 350 Haverford Online respondents, 67, or 19.1% of those wish to switch to in-person, and the rest wish to remain in Haverford Online. And now I will turn it back over to Dr. Rushi for recommendations and next steps.
Thanks, Jen. To carry on with the instructional model selection preference that Jen just spoke about, I think it's important to note that that was not a vote. So there could be people in the community who would be looking at that and saying, well, that was my preference because hybrid wasn't offered as the preference. And we recognize that. That was, as I said, not a vote. That was if we are looking at 5 days of in-person instruction, would you like to move your child to Haverford Online if there's space available, or would you be inclined to have your child continue to come to school with more of those students present? So our recommendations for next steps is that the recommendation we're bringing forward to you tonight is that a return to full-time in-person instruction for our elementary aged students on March 22nd. If you'll refer back to, you don't need to move, Anna. If you refer back to the slide that where Nicole talked about the different things that we're looking at, 600 desks, storage containers outside of our buildings. Many of our elementary buildings were previously set up with tables in the K-2 classroom. And tables are wonderful in K-2 classrooms, and having children sit in groups and working together. Everything has come down to square footage now as a result of COVID. Those tables will not allow for students to be socially distanced the way they need to be socially distanced, and for us to have the majority of students return to 5 days of in-person learning. So that necessitates for us getting an acquisition of the desks. I will say I did hear earlier, why weren't we prepared for this? This is not an indication that anyone in the district was not thinking about this or not prepared in some way. Those desks are arriving all at different times. When you try to work with manufacturers and to try and have that quantity delivered all at the same time, or even within a 2-week period of time, it is next to impossible. I'm not going to finger point at any of the carriers, whether it's UPS, FedEx, big trucking companies, but I think we've all seen things as simple as the US Post and how long it is taking to receive items, even just in the mail. Well, the amount of materials that we have ordered are not all going to be in place. It's very important to us that when we make this transition for children and teachers, that it is as smooth as it can possibly be, and that teachers and parents feel that we are ready for it. And we're not ready for it if the desks are have been delivered, but they're not assembled. Or if they're not, everything is not placed into the classrooms. So March 22nd is the date that we are recommending for our return to 5 days of in-person learning at the elementary level. We will look to provide, Jen talked about some of the things that teachers are already trying to do as they are instructing and doing the work that is their typical work of the day. But they will be looking at recreating some of the guided reading groups because they will, with the numbers of students that they will have in the class. Working on seating charts will be very important for the contact tracing, looking at who is within close proximity to students. So they will need time to get all of that set up in order to be well prepared to welcome students in a joyful way when they return to school on the 22nd. So for that reason, we would be adjusting the time on Friday, March 19th. It would be an asynchronous day for students, and that way the teachers would have time to get for their classroom preparation. And the afternoon has already been identified as parent-guardian conferences as scheduled. Moving forward and thinking ahead, we hope to discuss with you the return to in-person learning at the secondary level at the March 18th meeting. The timeline that Jen spoke about before is already underway at the middle and high school levels with the various groups and the principals interacting with them. And our proposed return date would be April 6th for that group, but more to come around that at our March 18th meeting. Jen mentioned the thank you to our parents, to our guardians, to the grandparents, to the extended family who have been working with our children for a full year now in trying to support families and support one another. Thank you to the teachers who have been, managing this roller coaster of what is our instructional model going to look like, and when will it change? Will it change now? Will it change later? And their planning and preparation that goes into thinking about how they're going to provide the instruction, how they're going to have this learning environment organized so that it is conducive to be a productive learning environment for students. Think of all the times that they've had to change that all throughout the year. As Mr. Mullen mentioned, and a huge thank you to our students who have been resilient, if nothing else. And look at what we have learned from them all throughout this year. But we continue to thank the community for their support of this uncertain time. And as I mentioned in a previous communication, we know all too well after the year that we have experienced that whatever decision is made will not be wholeheartedly embraced by everyone. That does not mean that the opinion and the feelings of someone are not valuable and are not of concern and importance to all of us. But a decision does need to be made. We feel that we are ready. We feel that we can have everything in place for students, for our teachers by that March 22nd date. And we ask people, continue to advocate for the vaccines. We have been told that there will be a second wave coming either the last week of March or the first week of April, and that Haverford School District will have another allocation dedicated for our staff at that point in time as well. Thank you, Mr. Feinberg. We'll take questions now.
Kristen?
Just really quickly, did anyone else's hand feature disappear? I'm not able to raise. Okay, maybe it's just me. Why I physically rose my hand. Thank you for presenting all of this, for all the thoughtfulness and work that has gone into not only this presentation, but the behind the scenes work to get schools ready to welcome our students back. I just wanted to go back to the staff survey for a moment. I was really struck by those numbers, that of the respondents, 50% don't feel comfortable returning. It's, I mean, I guess I'm worrying about teacher morale here. We are so close to having a vaccine. And I can attest, being an employee in the school district of Philadelphia, the second I got that vaccine, I just felt a wave of relief come over me. I mean, I have an added layer of protection now if I get called to go into a school that I didn't have before. I just want to know how we're going to bridge this gap. I mean, to bring in 50% of our teachers, to have them coming from potentially a place of fear, for their health, for their safety. And I know our students are incredibly important, but not at the expense and sacrifice of our teachers. So could you say more about that, please?
Certainly. So I will remind folks that that survey was issued on February 1st. A few things have changed since then. The 346 vaccines that have been allocated for the school district of Haverford Township, we do have, and I hate this word, but we do have a priority order that we are to identify. This is not a first come, first serve for 346 employees. We are to begin with teachers who teach K to 12, special education, instructional assistants, who work in those environments as well. We believe that some of those staff members have already been vaccinated. From there, we move on to elementary, and we are to begin with the kindergarten and work our way up. So there is a very systematic approach to this vaccine. When the governor talked about it, he said specifically that the focus is to start with elementary, because he sees this as a way to enable families to get back to work when the youngest students are back in school. And that is our priority order, follows that. As I said, elementary teachers, related in classroom support staff, beginning with our youngest students, moving there to bus drivers, who are working again with our youngest students. And so it's after you have all of those teachers, if there are any more of the 346 vaccines left, that we will then continue with the order of magnitude that we have been given there. So Kristen, I can't speak for exactly how each one of those individuals will feel if they are able to get the vaccine, or how many have been able to secure a vaccine since that time. That's a month now that we think some folks have, but we do realize that there will be some people who don't feel comfortable, and we will try to work with Mike and members of the association to do what we can to help with that.
Thanks. And just a quick follow-up to that related. Do we have a sense, I'm wondering, have these surveys covered how many of our staff have already been vaccinated and how many are willing to be vaccinated? Should it become available for them?
That is the survey that is out now. And we are hopeful that those who have been vaccinated will participate in it.
Sure. All right, thank you.
Other questions from the board? Laura?
I had two questions. So one was related to vaccine. I know you're still looking for parent lunch volunteers. Are those who become lunch volunteers, are they also eligible to get the vaccine?
Unfortunately, not in this round. I would not do that until I had every teacher in the district vaccinated.
Okay, but eventually, perhaps, if there are enough.
We had to submit a count of employees.
Okay. And then my other question was about the Haverford Online option. So I know that there was some uncertainty with parents who are trying to make the decision between in-person and Haverford Online that are currently doing hybrid. If they are moved to Haverford Online, are they looking at Pearson, or are they looking at moving to a classroom with, an online classroom with a Haverford teacher?
Do you want to take that, Jen?
Sure. Our principals are working very hard right now to find where they can integrate the people who indicated that preference into the current Haverford Online classes. There may be one or two where we may have to say, are you willing to wait? We also have to find out where the two transition because we have some who want to leave hybrid and go to Haverford, and then we have some who want to leave Haverford Online and go to hybrid. So you have to sort of do both at the same time. But that is what we are looking at right now. Of course, Pearson remains available if someone, prefers that option, but right now it looks like we'll be able to, integrate them to the greatest degree possible.
Great, thank you so much.
Antoinette?
Yeah, thanks. I really want to thank you, Dr. Rushi. I want to thank Jen and Nicole and all of the principals for going through every single detail of this process and really, putting in all of the thought and effort in, really this great way to give us this information, but also methodically. I think it really helps for the comfort level of parents, of students, knowing how much effort has gone into this. And it's really helpful as a board member, as a mother, of an elementary school student, to know how much effort has gone in. And my only question is, because I think just like I think it was Jen that had pointed out, one of the main reasons to really increase in-person schooling is that social emotional health of our students, the mental health of our students. And so my question is there anything planned, to increase guidance, to increase, where is everyone in their mental health? I would say both for students and also for staff. What are we assessing mental health wise, and how can our programs be of assistance to those students and staff?
You want that, Jen?
Sure. Yeah. So thank you, Antoinette. First of all, it has been a tremendous effort on the part of our principals and really the folks in the buildings who have to work out all of the logistical details. And we just very much, as you have mentioned, appreciate their attention to that detail and how much they know about what their community needs and how hard they work to try and meet that. This is absolutely a primary concern. It's something we talked about at a principals meeting today, even. In one instance, one way of looking at it is how do we use what we are doing currently to welcome students back into an environment where not all of them will feel, as comfortable as their neighbor might feel. And how do we use responsive classroom and morning meeting to help bolster that? How do we make, you need to have another, like, these are our classroom norms conversation, and this is us getting to know each other in this environment focus. And so that is something, we have a lead teacher who has been trained in responsive classroom and serves as a trainer, and she will be continuing to provide resources, but specifically on sort of restarting that piece. Our guidance counselors continue to meet weekly and are aware of the increased needs where those increases are. We do see that more at the secondary level right now, and in particular buildings at the elementary level. So one of the reasons that we are delivering our guidance lessons in the manner that we do, with the frequency that we do, is to preserve time for our guidance counselors, our school counselors, excuse me, to actually have groups and to meet with individuals and to reach out to families. We had an option of employing their time differently, and we wanted to preserve that for them. So we continue to monitor that. And I will, although I don't want to speak for Greg, our HR department has been putting out in conjunction with our healthcare providers, some mental health and social and emotional wellness webinars and activities for staff to engage in, as well as we do have an EAP program, which continues to be publicized throughout the school year to ensure that staff know what's available to them. And they also are always invited to work with our school counselors and share with any of our social workers and the other mental health professionals that are working within our buildings.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much. I think I'm not surprised that everything has been thought of and discussed at length. It's really, I think the district is very lucky to have all of you really putting in this planning process. And so thank you so much. I would just finish off with I attended the principals meetings of my daughter's school, and I really would encourage everyone who is nervous or uncomfortable to attend those meetings and just watch the recordings of them, because they really are so granular. There was an example of, I know that this cohort of this classroom is going to have to eat lunch in the class, and I mean, it was really impressive how much planning went into it. And so absolutely, Jen, I totally understand how much is going on, especially at the specific building level. So again, just thank you so much.
Thanks, Antoinette. Bridget?
Hi, thank you again so much for all of the information and the thoughtfulness touching on the different aspects of this decision that are concerns and priorities for the district, as well as for everybody in our school community. I know one of the things that came up tonight was in some of the public comments and in some of the topics was a need to perhaps kind of make up some academic ground for academic time that was lost this year. I think the presentation of the decisions about more time in school also focused on like those very many and broad roles that the district provides in, there's certainly the academic element, but there's the wellness, the community building, the safety and belonging and all of that. But I'm wondering if you could maybe speak to and help people kind of understand, kind of set some expectations for what more time in school will look like, what some of the goals are for the rest of this academic year, and kind of maybe even thinking more broadly, since now we've had 2 school years that were significantly interrupted with COVID closures. Kind of what's the kind of academic plan to help kids kind of fill in some gaps and get to the academic benchmarks?
I'll start with that, and then I'm sure Jen will jump in at a very surface level. What the day will look like will largely be in part due to what school should be. 5 full days. The kids are coming back. They're going to have their schedule that is somewhat familiar to them. So in terms of that logistic, it should look very similar. Now, how will the culture, the climate, how will all of that feel in the building is going to take a little bit of time. And it's probably one of the things that our teachers are most concerned about, keeping the distance that they need to keep from students. That's not how teachers teach. And particularly when they're working with the youngest of learners. And I would imagine that, that will create a certain amount of anxiousness, in the classroom. Looking at how lunch is going to be a little different when students are out, but the students have, for us, compared to some of the other districts, our students know what a full day is like. And now it's going to be a full day with more children around them. And I'll let Jen talk about the academics, and she works with the reading specialists and the coaches and some of the conversations that they've been having.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Rushi, and thank you for raising that question. We have been, as you know, carefully looking at the data that are available to us in order to determine how do we address whatever gaps may occur. And sometimes that gap is not meeting a benchmark, and sometimes that gap is not performing as expected or as typically would be performed. And a couple of things that have occurred really immediately after looking at our winter data is really trying to hone in on how can we shore up some things when it comes to reading for our youngest students. We, this week and some of next week, have had what we're calling, it's a foundations coach, which sounds probably like a little bit more athletic than it is. Foundations is our K-2 early foundations of literacy program that we use for all students in K-2. And a coach has been in to work with all grades. She's been able to come in and model lessons and to give us some pointers and some advice on how we might be able to make some sort of really fast wins and tighten up anything that we could be doing for the remainder of the year to support students. So that's something, and I have to say, she has found a lot of really positive things that are already occurring, but then some like really easy, fast, like put the letters up over here instead of over here, kind of easy things. Hey, you haven't been doing the marking up. Let's do the marking up. You know, she's been able to help us with that. And so she'll continue her building visits into next week. And that's really focusing, as I said, on the youngest learners with the most foundational skills, which is important. Another thing that we are doing is we are convening a task force to look at how do we use what's currently already an intervention and enrichment period that every grade has in every school at the elementary level. What could that look like next year? What additional resources will we need for students? How can we divide the students to better target what their needs are? We have some additional, they call diagnostic assessments, which will help us really hone in on like, what is the issue the child is having, which might be able to be solved with some faster reinforcement rather than sort of globally trying to just practice something again. Similarly, we've met with the psychologists within the last 3 or 4 weeks to look through how could we be using Zern as what we call an intervention for math. So Zern, you've heard Dr. Nesbitt present before. It's additional practice, but it includes also additional instruction that happens that's really personalized to how a student is understanding what they're trying to do. It's an adaptive program. And so we are looking at how do we use those reports to really target some more intervention for students when it comes to math as well. So I do have to say, I try to reassure people. I try and share that this is not only my perspective, but the perspective of many educators, that we are, of course, aware of and concerned about students who are not performing, who are struggling, whose performance comes with a great struggle that we are not even seeing. We are aware that all of that is true. And at the same time, we don't want anyone to feel that they are behind, or that it is, you know, their job to get extra tutoring to catch up. You know, that is what school is about. We have trained professionals who meet with our students, who are working very hard. We have systems that we are continuing to bolster to really support students and in their learning. And we will continue to work on that. And we continue to prioritize, you know, the most foundational, the most important skills to move from one grade to the next. And to do that with the expertise of our teachers, and of course, with the amazing efforts of our students and their incredible support systems that they have at home.
Thanks, Jen. Any other questions from the board at this time? Kristen?
Yeah, Jen, so related to, I guess, helping students get academically back on track and the complications around that given our circumstances. Can you talk a little bit more about what small group instruction, what intervention time, guided reading, what that's going to look like in a socially distanced classroom, knowing that, yes, we're 3 feet between students, but we're still 6 to 3 feet between teachers and support staff?
Yeah, sure. It's kind of hard to get a picture, right? And in every classroom, it will look a little differently. I can tell you that our teachers have been practicing this way. Their rooms will now have more children in them, but it will be the same concept. One of the ideas that has worked for teachers is the strategic seating charts. So, you know, I personally was in a first grade classroom a couple of weeks ago where to meet with one group, the teacher stood in the doorway, and she was able to have those students turn to her, and the remaining students were working individually. And then she moved to the front of the classroom and she worked with the students who were there. And then I was in another classroom where they happened to have an alcove that is not used in the same way. And they were able to pull the students sort of back a little bit. And I mean, the teacher took the time to say, you know, so-and-so, can you move your chair over a little bit more? Okay, a little bit more now. Okay, almost there. All right. And making sure that the students were spaced as they were spaced. Some teachers have tried, although this is more challenging, using Zoom like this. You just have to really be on the muting and unmuting, otherwise you get the feedback. So listen, I do not want to say that it is ideal, and I don't want to say it's easy. I will just say that teachers are making efforts to really make sure that they still have that time with students so that they can target the instruction during that time.
Thanks, Jen. Any other questions from the board at this time? Okay,
Larry, sorry, I keep having so many questions. This one is for Dr. Rushi, Ms. Battistelli. So just knowing the whole pandemic coordinator role that you've taken on this year, in addition to your regular duties for Ms. Battistelli, I'm wondering, Dr. Rushi, if there will be additional supports for contact tracing or contact notification, I think we started calling it, based on CCHD, and just what that role is going to look like now that we're going to have more students in the building, more teachers in the building, potentially more contact tracing.
So the short answer, I think, if your question is there more supports, not any new supports being brought on, but perhaps a looking, look at what Nicole has been doing all year long, looking at repurposing different resources, different human resources, and asking people to assume different responsibilities. And unfortunately, there have been some things that we put on a back burner as well. Most unfortunate for Nicole is a lot of what happens in her office cannot be put onto a back burner. But she and her staff, and Nicole now meets weekly with the nurses, maybe even more than weekly, Nicole, but I'm aware of a weekly meeting that she has with all of the district nurses just to go over COVID protocols, get updates on what's happening in the buildings. And she's always mindful of, even down to when they were scheduling the assurance testing, scheduling it in the buildings at a time when both the nurse and the medical building assistant are present. Because it's not just one nurse, there are medical building assistants that are there as well. She has been very creative about the way that she is, utilizing resources. However, we're not going to take advantage of her creativity and her willingness to always jump in and do, what can be done. So part of my job is to, monitor this whole team in terms of who has responsibility for what, and make sure that no one person is at risk of being burnt out because of that work.
Thank you. And Nicole, thank you so much for all the work you've been doing and leading throughout these months, many months now in hybrid.
Thank you.
okay, last chance for questions from the board on this. Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks, Dr. Rushi. Thanks, Jen. Thanks, Nicole. Appreciate all the work that's going into this.